Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pre-show for Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. Just making sure everything is working as hoped here, so just bear with me. So far, all the numbers look good. I hope everyone's had a great week. My son graduated, my third son. Well, not my third son. So I have an older boy and then a set of twins. Now everybody has graduated from college. So the parental burden of college is over, as it is for my sons. More power to them. This graduate was probably I don't even know how to phrase it, probably the most poorly, and I hate to even say this because it doesn't seem fair, but one of the most poorly organized graduations I've seen. Poorly, and I hate to even say that. Yeah, look at that. There I am. I'm working fine on YouTube. It was unbelievable, and the idea that they couldn't anticipate it is a little weird, since they gave each student X number of tickets and then they charged for additional tickets. So you could clearly anticipate bad things were afoot, right? But it was insane, and this isn't. I'm not a last minute guy. You know, my philosophy has always been, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late, kind of a thing. Oh wow, look at that. Even LinkedIn is working. Bad things. I got there, I think, an hour and a little bit early, and there was one other member of the family that was going to go there a little bit earlier and try to coordinate things, and everything was a complete disaster from the get-go. In terms of just getting there and traffic and parking and just the raw number of people that were trying to get in there. Let's see if we're up on X. Doesn't look like we are. At least the direct link isn't working. But I'll bet when you go to my profile, it's working. Yeah, there we go. Make sure the audio's on. Doesn't look like we are. Yeah, there we go. We are set to go. So, I always like to use the pre-show period to address any maybe non-real estate related stuff. It's always interesting to me that there are things that people are willing to bring up to me privately that they just don't want to bring up here. So frequently I'll get non-real estate related questions outside of the comments, right, that you can do. And for comments, just so everyone knows, the comments will appear on the screen as you watch as well. So if you're on a platform where you can't see the comments from YouTube or the comments from Facebook, and I'm not sure all of those go in. I mean, I know that I am set up so that I can see all the comments from all the platforms. Not sure what you guys can see on your I'm assuming you'll just see whatever comments are on your platform, right? So only YouTube folks only see YouTube comments. LinkedIn folks only see LinkedIn comments. X people only see X comments. But I also know that if I comment back through this process, this tool that I use to send out to multiple platforms, it won't work in terms of sending my texts or my responses to some of those other platforms. So, which shouldn't be a problem, right? Because anything that's brought up in comments, I'll just address verbally, so then everybody will see it. But if you're looking for what other people might be saying, look to the video stream. You should see. In fact, let me just post something right now. So there you go. I just posted something. Will it show up on the screen? It should show up on the screen, unless I have it set up to not be on this splash screen, which is a distinct possibility. Yeah, you know what? It's set up to not be on the splash screen, so you won't see it there. Something I'll need to remember to change for next time. I hope you've all brought your favorite coffee today. We have so many different things we could chat about. I mean, last month's was interesting, simply because of the National Association of Realtors change. A lot of you folks haven't heard about this settlement that's occurred, where the way that buyer agents is going to be compensated is being completely turned on its head, which is obviously going to cause some problems. There have been some changes in terms of when it's going to take effect, that sort of thing. It's been pushed back about a month. So instead of happening in the middle of July, it's going to happen in the middle of August now. I think that it's partly good and partly bad. I mean, some of these changes that they're making, I think do benefit, but I think it should have been the addition of options rather than the elimination of the existing option and tacking on other things. Primarily because the infrastructure just isn't there right now. And we would talk, I'll wait till the show actually officially starts to get too much into this, because this is really a hot button issue for me. The bottom line for me is what gives buyers and sellers the most options and the most control, right? And honestly, I don't think that the system as it existed was what it's been made out to be. And I think that there are some interesting business interests involved in this outcome that will provide, on the upside, will provide more options for buyers in terms of what sort of representation that they select. But I think it also opens up, and this is just true of any process that leans more into providing options, is I think that the potential for buyers to get really hosed dramatically increases. And we'll have to see how things go. I think this is also an opportunity for the National Association of Realtors to do some self-examination on what value they actually bring to the equation. They've had sort of a monopoly on a lot of this process for an awful long time, something I've never agreed with. But the idea that we take the way folks have been handling compensation forever and just toss it out the window, I think doesn't make sense. Because I think that the current model is a valid one, but I definitely endorse the idea of having other models available to buyers. So we're not doing that. We're getting rid of the existing model and replacing it with less effective models. But we'll see how this all plays out. So anyway, back to the graduation thing. So yeah, so for those of you who have a memory longer than a month, you remember that last month I said my son was graduating from college, and I was incorrect. I had the wrong month. So there you go. I inadvertently had put on my calendar that my son was graduating this time last month, only to discover it wasn't happening. But I discovered it relatively quickly, but I had already entered the new date and alerted everybody through the various channels that the date was changing. So I thought it would be a little bit goofy to change it back to the normal Saturday. And I've actually gotten some feedback that the folks prefer Sunday. So I don't know. I'd love to hear from you all what you think is the better way to do this. I'm happy to do it, whatever makes it easier. I know here in my community, Sundays aren't the preferred day for this kind of stuff. So in my local market, probably it's not something that a lot of people are jazzed about. But feel free, let me know what you think. And I just realized I'm not live on Facebook yet, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Welcome, Facebook listeners, watchers, viewers. Apologies. We did start at quarter till as usual for the pre-show, but I forgot to click the turn on Facebook button. So apologies to you folks. As I mentioned, for anyone, and let me see if I've got anybody up on, I do have one viewer watching on Facebook. So somebody was actually sitting there waiting for it to start. I thank you for being patient. Just so you're aware, and I know I'm repeating this for the folks who've been here for the last 10 minutes, you'll only see your comments. You're not going to see comments made by folks from YouTube or elsewhere. But if you watch the video stream, typically to the left-hand side, when someone makes a comment on not on Facebook, it won't be, I guess I should have pointed that one out. If you make a Facebook comment, it's only going to be in Facebook. It's not going to be anywhere else. If you make a comment in YouTube, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, any of those, the comment or question will show up in the video feed, in the video stream. There are a variety of reasons why it gets done that way. The tool that I use called Restream does a horrible job managing the creation and maintenance of a stream on Facebook. So I tend to not use it. And I do it as a separate stream. So that's why there's a disconnect there. But of course, I do watch both feeds. I do watch both comment feeds. I have them up on my screen. So I will absolutely be able to see whatever comments you might make. So feel free to share those. It might not happen immediately. So just so you're aware, it may take me a minute to see it. but I just want you to know I am doing my best to keep an eye out so that I'll see what you all want to discuss. We're about 5 minutes away from kicking off the regular show, and of course, during that time, we're going to talk about the latest numbers. I've got a few interesting news items we can talk about, the usual quick pitch for what I have to offer, just because, that's in order for people to notice what you do and potentially reach out when they need help, they need to know what you have to offer. So I do a little bit of that. I would love to find out how many folks out there are thinking about moving, no matter where you are. I prefer to have this conversation with folks in California, just because as time goes on, I encounter more and more people who are interested in leaving California. And I think that's interesting. I've been doing this since the 80s, and the trend was always 80% of the people whose homes I was helping sell were folks who were going to stay in the state. They were just going somewhere else in the state. In fact, I can remember in the early 90s, mid 90s, helping someone sell a home only to help them buy a home 5 minutes away, right? They loved the town they were in, but the house they currently owned was just too much house for them, that kind of thing. Or they wanted a bigger home because the family was growing. It was that type of thing, right? And that was about 80%. Not of those two categories, but maybe moving somewhere else in the state. So maybe not super local, but somewhere in the state. Now it's the other way around. Whereas 20% of the people then were moving out of the state. Now it's 80%. Like a vast, just complete change. And that's been sort of a gradual thing that's happened over about the last 10 years, 15 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's been ramping up since 2012, 2013, right around there. And there have been a few waves. There was an early 90s surge in folks moving out that was very short-lived. As some companies moved out of the area. This is right around when Apple moved their technical support folks to Austin, for instance, right? There were several companies. I think Dell moved out. There were several companies that moved to Texas and other areas. So, but now it's completely that we are losing. Way more companies are relocating. Way more people are wanting to move out. It's super interesting because of what COVID did in terms of opening the door to working remotely. The amazing number of people who got approval to work remotely and have completely just left the state. It's kind of an amazing number. All right, folks, we're about to kick off the show. We just got 30 seconds left to kick it off. We've got some interesting numbers here, too, to check out, particularly when we hit the price reduction numbers. And we want to remember that the April numbers are interesting, right? So we're heading into that hot period of time. Let me just go ahead and put my ugly mug up there. Hello, everyone. We are just now kicking off the show. It has just now kicked over to 10 a.m. Welcome to Coffee and Real Estate with me, Robert Whitelaw. I am the Rebel Broker. If you listen to my podcast that's been going on since 2007, you know that's kind of the name I started with back when I didn't share my name. And I just called myself the Rebel Broker because I wanted to complain about real estate without really putting my real name out there. And then over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, someone convinced me I should just go ahead and show the face. So now I do. And this is my latest thing. I don't remember how many years ago we started doing Coffee and Real Estate, but this is an opportunity for us to talk about things going on in our local markets in Santa Clara County, in Silicon Valley primarily, particularly the southern area where I'm based. But I do work with folks all the way from Palo Alto all the way down to Gilroy. So if you've got any real estate related things you need help with, feel free to reach out to me. You can do that at my website at soldbyrobert.com. But I am a licensed real estate broker and realtor with licensed in 1988, so over 35 years of experience, ready to put that to work for you. We're going to go ahead and jump in and start with the numbers today. Let's see. Shall we go with that one? Yeah, let's do that one. Now, as usual, we're going to start with the total homes on the market. So this represents the inventory numbers, right? This is what, for buyers, this is the total number of homes you had to choose from. For sellers, this is the total number of homes you were competing with. And in this chart, we are comparing the exact same month. So we're comparing April of last year to April of this year. So we're eliminating any seasonal influences. This is really the only way to look at these numbers. If you don't understand what the seasonal influences do month to month, that month to month number doesn't really help you a whole lot. So And whenever someone can try to create a positive picture from showing the data one way or another, they tend to do that. That tends to be what. Or if you're one of those doom and gloom folks who always loves to get the clicks based on how much negativity you're throwing out there, you go the other way, right? And you'll imply a correlation that doesn't really exist because seasonal influences are throwing things off. Now, in Santa Clara County, obviously, it's going to be the biggest sample size we look at, and Santa Clara County is a great place to start. I think if you're trying to just take the pulse of the super broad market, I think looking at Santa Clara County numbers are the way to go, and that's actually what we focus on in the second half of these numbers. But we're up 36% from this time last year, a huge jump. 1,079 last year, 1,468 this year. San Jose up very commonly, and remember, San Jose is the largest city in Santa Clara County, so it makes sense that those numbers kind of jive together. 37% increase, 483 last year, 663 this year. In Morgan Hill, we had a 14% increase, 51 homes last year, 58 homes this year. And in Gilroy, we had a 9% increase, 55 last year, 60 this year. Let's see here. And I don't have any magical notes on those numbers. So let's just see. Next, we're going to take a look at new listings. And now these are the homes that got listed. So the data got entered into the MLS for a home to be put on the market in the month of April. Really big increase in Santa Clara County, up 61%. And remember, this is the time of year for this to happen, right? So April and May tend to be the time that homes come on the market if sellers are actively trying to, for two reasons. One, because sellers are actively trying to time historically when the biggest time of the market is. We see the biggest closes, the largest number of homes sold for the highest amount of money, typically in your June timeframe in the county. The other thing is just life, right? When school ends, like I said, when I just went to my son's graduation, kids are graduating from high school, kids are graduating from college, people are relocating, moving, doing their thing, and they want to get on the market and get sold and move on before they get the next school year starting, right? So for those of you who have kids in elementary school, junior high, high school, you're going to change schools. You want to get or you're not even going to change schools, but you're going to stay maybe in the same school district. You want to do that move in the summer, right? And it tends to be that's why this becomes the hot time of year. All right, so Santa Clara County up 61% from last year, 1,179 last year, 1,903 this year. San Jose up 59%, 574 last year, 915 this year. Morgan Hill up 91%, which I think is amazing. Now, I contributed to some of these numbers for Morgan Hill, and the home that I listed is currently in escrow. And it took a little longer than I anticipated, but one reason why we're going to talk about April a little bit more is because in that first week in April, that's when we saw that big jump in interest rates for mortgages, right? It went from like 6.8 to 7.4. In that neighborhood. So we saw a huge slowdown in the number of folks out there actively going ahead and buying. And there's an anecdotal story I can tell you about that because I think it's interesting that I have some frontline experience with how buyers were thinking during that time. So 91% increase in Morgan Hill. Gilroy saw a 30% increase, 43 homes last year, 56 homes this year. And remember, this is sellers deciding to go on the market. So that's what this represents. And that's a good thing. It shows it's something that we've been missing for a long time. More sellers coming on the market. We still need to have more. This isn't like a historically normal number for any of these communities, but it's a good sign in terms of overall inventory numbers. Because what we're going to cover next is homes sold. So these are the homes that actually sold in April. But keep in mind, this means they accepted an offer in March, right? Because remember, it takes 30 days or more for a home to close escrow. And which also means that the odds are that 99.9% of these homes that sold when interest rates had not yet gone up, since interest rates went up that first week in April. Okay? Because I think the reason I keep pointing that out is I think we're going to see a very interesting effect of the increase in interest rates, at least a blip of some kind, because interest rates have normalized a little bit. They've come down a little bit, and we'll look at those here at the end. But homes sold up 40% in April, from 837 last year in Santa Clara County up to 1,169. In San Jose, it was up 27%. Interesting to note, this is the first time the data for San Jose has dramatically deviated from the county overall, which shows us far more homes were selling outside of San Jose. And in a lot of these were homes that were more reasonably priced, and many of them not, right? Because remember, some of the communities outside of San Jose are very pricey. But 27% increase from the same time last year in San Jose. 454 last year, 575 this year. 105% increase in Morgan Hill. Lots of interest in Morgan Hill. 19 homes last year, 39 homes sold this year. 26 homes sold in Gilroy, 19 homes sold in Gilroy this year. That's a 27% decline. So it's the only community that we tend to check out here that had an actual drop in the number of homes that sold. And it wasn't because of a lack of inventory. It wasn't because buyers didn't have, it wasn't the supply and demand argument that we frequently make here, right? That so much of this relies on that. But one thing it does reflect is homes for Gilroy that were most attractive to buyers looking in that market were not attractive enough to get offers to get made on those homes. There are definitely homes in Gilroy that are going to be less attractive than others, particularly when compared to other marketplaces. And I think that's kind of a reflection of that reality here. In terms of, and also, another thing I wanted to cover here in terms of homes sold is, did we add to or subtract from the overall number of listings? In other words, did we list more than we sold? And in the case of all of these areas, we ended up listing more than we sold. So we added to inventory in every case. So for instance, new listings in April for the county was 1,903. Homes sold was 1,169. So that's 734 homes that we added to inventory. In San Jose, we added 340 homes to inventory. In Morgan Hill, we added 43 homes to inventory. In Gilroy, we added 37 homes to inventory. So in all of these cases, we are adding homes to inventory. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, one reason is because this is the time of year when we start to see that number flipping, where we're actually selling more homes than we're listing, and we're not seeing that. We have had years where by the time we hit April, we are selling more than we're listing, and that isn't happening. If we're going to see it at all this year, it's going to be the May, June numbers, and we'll see how those go. But given the large discrepancy, the large number of homes we're adding to these marketplaces, which is uncharacteristically large given past years, I would guess that we may never get there. We may see a continuing escalation in inventory, which would be an interesting thing to see, because it would be a very different market if that reality were to come about. Next, total months of inventory. Now, let's see what we think of this. Now, just to calibrate you, this is a number that represents if we were to freeze the total inventory right now, and we sold the same number of homes every month that we sold in April, how long would it take to sell off that inventory, right? The nationally healthy number is considered to be 4.5 to 5.5 months. We haven't been at that number in forever. It's been in a very, very long time. And we're going to compare this to last year. So Santa Clara County, just to wash, 1.3 months of inventory last year, 1.3 inventory this year, 9% increase in San Jose, so 1.1 last year to 1.2, 44% decrease in Morgan Hill, so it was taking 2.7 months to get something sold last year at this time, 1.5 months, not to get something sold, but months of inventory this year. Gilroy up 52%, with 2.1 months last year, 3.2 months this year. So in terms of balance, in terms of how much supply is there, Gilroy has the closest to a quote-unquote nationally healthy number. And it also reflects something I've said a lot about Gilroy for a very long time. I do continue to think that Gilroy represents an excellent market where buyers can find value. There are some great areas in Gilroy. Gilroy has its own challenges as a community in terms of higher crime rates or being more distant from where you may be commuting to. But there are some beautiful areas of Gilroy that I think are worth your time if you're someone who's been priced out of, say, a Morgan Hill market or a San Jose market based on interest rates and those sorts of things. So something I think you should consider if you're interested. And also, I think Gilroy is also a great town to consider making an investment, whether you want to do a duplex or a multi or a single family residential rental. All right, next, let's take a look at the pending and contingent numbers. This means that in the month of April, these number of homes accepted an offer, meaning that the status of the home in the multiple listing service changed from active, or come look at this house and make offers, to it's pending. We have an offer and we're not looking at offers right now, or we're contingent and we're willing to consider other offers if the contingencies don't get released by the buyer. Now, in Santa Clara County, that number went up 26%. It was 996 last year, 1,259 this year. San Jose is up 27%, 496 last year, 632 this year. Morgan Hill up 24%. 42 homes went pending last year, 52 went this year. Gilroy, again, heading the other direction, down 16%. 38 homes went pending last year, 32 went pending this year. Why do we care? Right? So one reason, I mentioned a moment ago about home sales being a lagging indicator because it represents offers that were accepted at least a month prior. This is a leading indicator. If we go pending on a property, that means it's likely going to close escrow in the next month or so. So I would expect to see increases in, and we'll see the month-to-month numbers here in a minute where we can make a better estimation of where we think we're going to go. But since these are all up from the same time last year, my guess would be we're going to see greater numbers of sales, right? And more homes are selling. And my guess in Gilroy would be we'll see fewer homes selling in the next month. All right. Next, let's take a look at average original price. This is what the price was on the listing the day it went on the market. So this tells us the expectations of sellers. What did a seller believe they would list their home for? What did they think it would get in the market? And across the board, we've got big increases. So, well, not across the board, but in the communities where I would have expected not quite as much given the activity levels. So let's just jump in here. So Santa Clara County is up 3.8% overall. Last year, 1.9 million. This year, 1,978,000. And we're creeping up to that point where we're going to be over 2 million on expectations. And we've been here before with Santa Clara County. So we'll see how that pans out. And remember, these are expectations. These are what they were listed for. This is not what they sold for, which we're going to cover here in a minute. San Jose, 1,379,000 last year, 1,471,000 this year for a 6.6% increase. Morgan Hill, that is not a negative. Sorry, that's a plus. But Morgan Hill has a 10.3% increase in expectations from the same time last year. 1,495,000 last year, 1,649,000 this year. Gilroy had an increase of 17.5%. 1,172,000 last year, 1,378,000 this year. And Gilroy is another one of those communities where once you get that smaller volume of properties where you're talking handfuls, like 10, 20, 30, 40, one really big property can really skew these numbers. And I think that's what we're seeing here in terms of this measurement of expectations. I think I'm almost sure like a $4 million property came up in Gilroy recently, but I'm just ballparking on that one. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at now what actual sales prices were. And then we're going to see how off from expectations were these numbers. So in Santa Clara County, we can see that the average sales price was $1,779,000 last year, $1,992,000 this year. That's a 12% increase. So in actual sales numbers, it's up 12% from the same time last year. If we look at expectations, right? Expectations were lower than the average sales price, which means on average, sellers were getting $14,328 above what they expected at the time the homes were listed, right? In San Jose, up 9.5%. That's $1,418,000 last year, $1,553,000 this year. And in San Jose, sellers were getting $82,209 above expectations, right? For those homes that listed at the same time period versus those that actually sold, those expectations of those sellers in that month were exceeded in what the market actually delivered to them. Morgan Hill And we can talk a little bit more about this one. Again, I have some very, very topical firsthand knowledge on this one. We do see a 7.2% increase in the total number of what homes were selling for in the marketplace, which is absolutely very respectable and good for sellers. 1,370,000 last year, 1,468,000 on average last year. However, this represents in terms of expectations, in terms of what sellers thought their home should sell for, this number is $180,319 below what the expectations of sellers were. Now, and this is something that's, I think, very interesting. Homes that have been selling with multiple offers is a good example, where I've now had multiple scenarios where we got multiple offers on a property, but half of them came in below asking price. And I've talked to some agents in some other markets, and I've been involved with some transactions in some other markets, one in San Jose, another one over in Sunnyvale, where the same thing is happening, whereas everything was above asking price before. Now, here's something that's interesting. And I almost hate discussing this because escrow hasn't closed yet. I don't want to jinx it. But I thought there was some very interesting numbers relating to a property that I was working on over the last month or so, where one of the things I do is very closely track how many views do I get on the various platforms, on the MLS listing site, on Realtor.com, on Facebook, on all these various places, not Facebook, on Zillow, all these other places. What kind of viewing do I get? How many views do I get? How many saves do I get or favorites do I get? And then how many people share it with other people, right? All of those numbers I track, and I send a weekly report to my clients, and then I check it kind of every day, every other day. On this particular property, from the day it got listed, it got all the kind of exposure and demands for viewings that I would expect of a property that's going to sell super, super fast and for over asking price, right? We had people who wanted to see the property. Literally, I clicked the button, and within 10 hours, I had multiple people who wanted to see the property. Fantastic. That's great. The first day, thousands of views, like a couple of hundred saves, several shares. So all numbers that historically to me as a real estate guy tell me our penetration in terms of our advertising, in terms of getting in front of eyeballs, which doesn't count my other stuff, right? So I usually do 4 different types of direct mail pieces that have a QR code on them, where if you use it, I know how you got that QR code, right? I know which piece of marketing you were looking at when you zapped that PR code or QR code to go look at the material to view more details on the property. All of those were getting ridiculously great responses. And some of the target audiences for me are, for instance, people who are currently renting, but the household income is enough that they could afford to buy. People who are living in a 2-bedroom home that are in a price or age range that indicates that they may see a growth in their family coming up, right? So in other words, it was my move up people, my first buyer people who have the income to do it. It was people who might be downsizing. So all of these are sort of categorized into different chunks, and then I send these out, both digital and physical. Across the board, we got amazing numbers in terms of people looking at the information and consuming it, right? But what I saw was a complete disconnect between that and then the feverishness or the enthusiasm of offers coming in. And I was holding open houses and having conversations with buyers, and every single one of them was like, with interest rates doing what they're doing right now, we're just not ready to make the jump. We love this house. And one of those folks who had those conversations with me did end up submitting an offer. But it wasn't until interest rates started to moderate a little bit and come down from that 7.4 that we went from having really. We had a couple offers that I wouldn't even categorize as serious. They were completely out there and nuts. But it took longer than would have been normal if the interest rates hadn't gone up. And there was a drop in interest rates, and then over that weekend that followed, we got a handful of offers that following Monday or Tuesday. So I thought it was a very interesting insight into when buyers are willing to pull the trigger. And I think that the reason why I'm bringing this up, obviously there's real estate agents out there who may or may not pay that close attention to what's going on with the marketplace, but you as a seller should really be aware of this stuff because it's absolutely, it was a very clear example of how those things have a direct effect. Now, so what's the net effect? Yes, this home is going to sell for over asking price, but it definitely took longer to get a offer or multiple offers to make that happen, right? So I think that's one of the things that you trade off here is the potential need for you to have patience when the market's more challenging for buyers, right? Okay, sorry, I don't know if I went off on a weight tangent here. Now I'm not even sure where we are. I think I covered all of these in terms of what the average sales prices were. Did I mention Gilroy? 1,205,000 up to 1,387,000 in terms of expectations for a 15.1% price increase. Again, these are actual sales prices. So still seeing a lot of growth there. Next, let's go ahead and talk about percent over under asking price. Now, this number, when you see this number over 100, it tends to reflect that you're seeing multiple offers, right? Because why would you offer way over asking price if there weren't multiple offers? So in Santa Clara County overall, the number's nuts. Last year, it was 104.2, meaning a year ago, homes on average were selling for 4.2% over asking price. This year, it's 109, which means on average, homes are selling 9% over asking price, and that's a 4.8% increase in the same time last year. San Jose, 104.6 last year, 109.3 this year for a 4.7% increase. Morgan Hill, 102.9 last year, 103.9 this year for a 1% increase. And Gilroy saw no change at all. Gilroy saw 100.9 both last year and this year. The Morgan Hill number is going to be interesting. Again, as I said, I've got a lot of hands-on experience with what's going on in the market here in Morgan Hill. It wouldn't surprise me, given the time of year, we should see this increasing. And it's really going to depend, I think, in a lot of ways on what interest rates do. But what's really going to be interesting is seeing what happens to days on market. Because I'm wondering if some sellers, now I encourage my sellers to just sort of buckle up and ride out the market. And I think I didn't. Did I not share on average sales price that we were just talking about with Gilroy? I didn't share where that stood for expectations. Sorry, sorry to rewind on you. But it was $9,280 above expectations in Gilroy. So Morgan Hill was the only city where we saw substantial differences between expectations and reality, meaning that reality was below what expectations were. And that's one reason why I'm mentioning all of this patience and what's affecting people making offers and expectations versus reality is because it's going to take, if your home is priced right, you may have to wait longer for the buyer to come along that's going to be willing to take on whatever other challenges may exist in the marketplace relating to interest rates or other things that will facilitate a sale of your property. So just something to keep in mind. You may find some stressful bumps. Now, the data I'm seeing now indicates interest rates are kind of stabilizing, if not potentially going down a little bit more. And remember, they're not directly related to the prime rate. They're more associated with 10-year treasury notes. So just keep that in mind as we go. There's a lot more psychology involved in mortgage rates where nothing will change, but when expectations or beliefs change, suddenly the rate will go up or down. So it's kind of nuts. All right, next, let's talk about days on market. And this is going to be one that's going to be interesting to watch, particularly for the month of April and May, as we see what kind of an effect was there because of interest rates. Because I think there'll be an interesting one here on the month-to-month data. Now, in Santa Clara County, days are down 26%. 19 days last year, 14 days this year. San Jose, basically almost the same numbers, 37% lower this year. San Jose, 19 days last year, 12 days this year. Morgan Hill saw a 67% drop. 30 days last year, 10 days this year. And Gilroy saw a 13% drop from 30 days last year to 26 days this year. And this is, again, another indicator that this is a market where buyers are going to have a little bit more elbow room to make things happen as it's taking longer to get things sold. Gilroy is currently the only market that falls outside of that artificial bubble that I've talked about before. And by artificial bubble, I mean that many agents will list a home, I do, where we say, we will not consider any offers until such and such a date. And after that date, we will take offers as they're submitted. Simply because you want to make sure that you're getting the highest amount of exposure. And for me, that equals in that first week, all of my direct mail stuff is hitting, all of my online internet stuff is hitting, and that I've had a chance to do an open house. And I tend to do a lot of advertising for my open houses, or at least the first couple I tend to do a lot of advertising. So I want people to have an opportunity to see the house. I want there to be plenty of elbow room for buyers to not feel like they need to rush into something, or for my seller to have to deal with trickle-in offers in that first week to 2 weeks. So if you're seeing numbers in the 10 to 18 day range, that's typically an artificial number. I think the one I just sold, the days on market will show, well, it'll show a lot more than this, because it actually took longer because of the interest rate thing. But typically for a home I offer for sale, assuming the market is what it normally was in terms of crazy offers, 15, 16 days, simply because that's the way it ends up working out between when I say I want to see offers and then when my seller responds to those offers to make a final decision. Okay, anyway, so that covers that. We talked about days on market. Again, I think this is going to be an interesting one to watch as we digest what's happened with interest rates in the first week of April. Next, now we're looking over our shoulder. This is no longer just last year versus this year. This is now going all the way back, just month to month, right? And the very first number we're going to look at is total active listings. And we can see we're not at our peak. Our peak was back in June of 2022, but we are at a peak for this year. Heck, are we at a peak? We're at the highest we've been since October, November of 22. So inventory numbers are good, at least for buyers. We can see that at the same time last year, in April of last year, relatively flat on the following month. And I think that that's not going to be true this month. I think we're going to see continuing increases. I think we're going to see 2022 style increases in inventory. We may even see inventories that rival what we got in 2022. But if we look at the month leading up to April of 2022, look at that dramatic jump from just December all the way up. I mean, that was a classic, crazy first quarter jump in inventory, which is something we've seen a few years. Did not see it in 2023, primarily because of the interest rate craziness that was going on. Next, let's talk about new listings. How do we compare time over time? Again, huge jump. Look at how high that is. That takes us all the way back to May of 2022. If we look at where we're at with this versus, say here was last year, but 2 years ago, look at that. We actually had more come on board, and we had a decrease. This year we've had an increase. We had a flat performance last year, a decline into April. And this is this is something I've talked about before. For those of you who listen to my podcast, you know, we've talked about how the time at which sellers decide to come onto the market tended to move closer to January. And this was true in, say, 2019, 2020. But here we are with a huge ramp up in new listings. And I believe this continues. I think we potentially see this reach heights we have not seen in a very long time. In terms of new homes sold, homes sold, dramatic increases. We can see that last year was actually a decrease between March and April, with an increase directly after it. And we can see that it was a relatively minor increase, kind of an increase in April of 2022 from March to April, with a decline right after that. I don't think that's going to be true this month. I think we're seeing a big ramp up in sales that's going right along with total active listings and new listings. With new listings actually in terms of slope, actually increasing at a higher rate, and we know that, right? Because we know that we added homes to inventory rather than subtracted. Seeing home listings, new listings increase at a greater rate than homes are selling. All right. Where do we go from here? Well, despite what we've seen in past years, where last year it was I think we'll see what we saw last year with a dramatic increase. But I think this is going to be a steady slope to next month. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe we peak next month. It would, historically, if we're just thinking in terms of what happens in June, or excuse me, next month for this will be May. I think it increases in May, and then I think it potentially peaks in June in terms of total number of homes sold. So maybe for the 2 months after this, we see continuing increases in the total homes sold. Then we look at number of homes pending. And we can see that's relatively flattened out. Now, it's still increases, so we do still get the increase that I project for next month, but just not as dramatic. But it wouldn't surprise me if that ticks back up in May, and then in June we start to see more closings. So despite that slowdown in pendings, I think we see a continuing increase next month, not as dramatic as it has been since January, but it does increase. And then I think it increases once again in June, and then I think it goes down from there. I think I'm in the right ballpark anyway with that estimation. Next, let's talk about average list price versus sales price. And this is just a way to sort of see where hopes are and expectations are versus what the market's actually delivering. We can see that the light green line is original list price, so that's what sellers expected. We can see what the market actually delivered in the dark green line in terms of the actual sales prices. And we can see for the last 2 months, average sales price has been higher than average list price. Kind of a normal thing to expect in this time frame. And you can see here that we tend to get an increase in expectations, and we also tend to get an increase in what the homes actually sell for, a little flatter in 2022. But this is a little bit more dramatic, right, than we've seen in the last couple of years. And it wouldn't surprise me if that trend continues. I don't think it'll be as steep next month, but I think it'll still be an increase there in terms of expectations and sales prices sort of meeting each other and going up a little bit along the way. Next, let's talk about, let's see here. Where are we? I think this is, yeah. Percent of asking price, we can see, look at how high it is. I mean, it is now higher than, we have to go all the way back to May of 22 for a higher number. Which is kind of a stunner. And if we think back to what happens in previous Aprils, right? Here's April of 2023. Look at that. That wasn't even the peak of 2023. The peak really kind of came later in the month. Remember what was going on during these months. Let's think about this for a minute. In March, we had the interest rate jump. So we had things kind of get hit. But this, talk about a recovery from bad news. The fact that these homes are selling for so much over asking price when interest rates have been relatively challenging. So where do we go from here? This is an awfully steep curve, given what we're seeing. I mean, it's on par with what we were seeing in 22, right? I mean, look at these numbers. These are crazy. Now, do I think we get up to 115%? I don't know. It would. I think we've seen enough homes come on the market that it's good news in terms of hopefully modifying that or moderating that. But I think this number tends to increase from here, folks. I think this isn't going to be our record month for 2024. If we look at our record month last year, it was March, April. But as I pointed out before, things seem to be happening a little later. So it wouldn't surprise me if May, June is really where this peaks. And then we start to see it go down a little bit. So I think we still see more above where we're currently at in April. Next, let's talk about days on market. Of course, the huge drop from January, we had our peak. We always tend to see our peaks in January. See, here's January 2023. There's a peak. Here's January 2022. It isn't quite the peak, but pretty close. And that's just the seasonal thing we discussed, right? Wintertime is not when folks want to buy a house. It's typically not when people want to sell a house. So we tend to see these peaks in the wintertime, which then go down as we head into the more desirable time. Now, finally, let's check out what we're seeing for reduced prices. And this one's interesting because we've had a huge pivot. And the huge pivots tend to come this time of year because we're in that hot market, right? So homes maybe that have been on the market for a while, a lot longer than they should have, are rethinking, or maybe they're responding to the increase in interest rates. But we can see that all of these homes have had reduced prices. Now, last month in Santa Clara County, 17% of the homes listed had a price reduction. This month, it's up to 19%. Last year, at the same time, we're seeing it. This is a 49% increase from the same time last year. So that's these two numbers right here are month to month. So that's last month, that's this month, and then this is the same month in 2023. I hope I'm not confusing anybody with this, but it's up 50% from the same time last year. So a lot more sellers having to reduce their prices to be competitive in the marketplace in Santa Clara County right now than they were a year ago. In San Jose, that number's up 48% from last year. It was 14% last month, 18% this month, and then a year ago, the difference is 48% increase. Morgan Hill, this is a whopper. Last month, 24%. This month, 26%. But when compared to the same time last year, 114% increase. We've seen quite a few homes drop their prices. We have some, and usually this tends to be happening at the 1.4 million and greater level. The higher priced luxury homes tend to get hit harder by these things than other properties, because taking on that amount of debt, assuming you're only putting down 20%, of course, the all cash buyers aren't affected by this. And boy, I can tell you some great stories about all cash buyers that really feel like they've got a lot of power. I mentioned a deal I've got going right now. The two crazy offers that came in that I mentioned, both of those were all cash offers, and they were completely ridiculous and rejected. It wasn't going to happen. And some of the conversations I had with the agents, they were stunned that my folks weren't very excited to accept their all cash offers. So anyway, let's see. All right. So Morgan Hill is seeing a huge number of homes that need to be brought down in price. In fact, we can, if you want, we could even pull that up and show you where the dominant price reductions are, but they all tend to be above that price range we were talking about. And then, of course, in Gilroy, 25% last month, 18% this month. So fewer homes, unlike the other areas, fewer homes needed to do a price reduction in Gilroy. Again, because I think Gilroy has some pretty on-spot marketing or on-target pricing in Gilroy. But it is up 38% from the same time last year. So even they are feeling the stress of the market compared to the same time last year. Okay. I think that is it for those numbers. Now, if anybody has any questions about any of that, please let me know. I would be happy to review anything or have a chat about any questions you might have. Now comes the time when I want to give you the quick pitch on what I have to offer. And I'm not going to take up all your time. There's my beautiful face on my website. This is soldbyrobert.com. If you're interested in getting the value of your property, you can do that right here. One of the cool things that I offer here is a tool called HomeBot, and it will give you a monthly update. Looks something like this. Gives you a monthly update on what's going on with the value of your home. But then in addition to that, even if you never plan on selling, and this is something I like to try to give to everybody simply because I think it gives you some cool stuff, you also get access to a home equity tool, home purchase options, if you like, for you to invest in properties, that kind of thing, or add to your current home, refinance calculators for different scenarios, your mortgage summary, important options for your home, whether you want to, should you sell. It'll tell you, yeah, the market is showing some strong selling signals. You might have up to 1.44 million in purchasing power for a new home. You could use about 144,000 of equity to feel more ready for a storm, whatever, right? Net worth of your home renting tools to do some calculations on whether it makes sense for you to rent your home. So just some really cool tools there that I think are valuable to anyone. Even if you never plan on selling your home, I think this is a great tool for you. And then, of course, you can start your search right here if you're interested in buying a home. So feel free to reach out to me, soldbyrobert.com, and I'll be happy to help you start your real estate journey. I've also got SnapForce open here. This is one I use from time to time. I don't think I've used it in a little while, as in terms of just looking at interesting data. Now, this is the Zillow Home Forecast by Zip Code tool. And where are we? We're right there, zip code. So it's peak to current, July of 2023 to June of 2024. There's some very weird disconnects in terms of history of some of these numbers being a year old. So what we can also look here is the Redfin median sale price. Where's my plus? There it is. And there's Santa Clara County. I don't know, and these numbers are old, so I guess we won't be using that today. One of the first articles that kind of tickled my fancy as I was looking through them: mortgage demand from homebuyers drops even as interest rates pull back to April lows. One thing I'm noticing as an interesting trend is that buyers are in the current market, and I think this makes sense, right? Because they don't want to pay the higher interest rates. I'm noticing for instance, so every buyer who submitted an offer on a house I'm currently in escrow on had way more than 20% down. I think the lowest percent down was 40% of all the folks who were buying or submitting offers. Interestingly, they also all waived the appraisal contingency. A couple of them waived the loan contingency. And I think in those cases, those were folks who, if they had to, they could come up with more cash. But it's just an interesting dynamic. And it's a dynamic that, just a couple of months ago, I was seeing not as much of that, right? There's always going to be all cash people floating around. But I thought it was an interesting dynamic that really was brought out by the April increase. We'll see how this goes. I read through this that there's nothing in here that contradicts the headline, but it's interesting that mortgage demand nationally dropped. But me personally, in terms of feet on the ground interest in my listings, all of those have indicated strong buyer interest. It's been the submit an offer part that's been weak. And judging by what I'm hearing from buyers, it's because of the interest rates that they've sort of stepped back. Weekly housing data, just to sort of get a feel, right? We now know what our local data looks like. Let's see what things look like. We've got a summary down here. Median listing prices, no change. New listings up 6.6%. Our new listings were up in the county 61%. Active listings were up 35%. Excuse me, this isn't, I don't even think this is year to year. Yes, it is year over year. Good. Okay, I prefer that. Total number of active listings for us was up 36%, and that's right on par with what we're seeing nationally. And on days on market, nationally, it's taking a day longer to get homes sold. And I think that's all on par. I think in some submarkets, the days on market is about to take a hit. Now we'll see where this goes. This is obviously doing it week by week. So this is the May 11th week, which would obviously take into account some of the interest rate increases. So I think that's an interesting one to keep in mind as well, where they obviously saw a slowing down in the number of on how quickly homes were selling. New construction activity picked up 5.7% in April. New residential construction activity picked up in April, climbing 5.7% from March's downward trend. Again, this is a dumb thing. Because if one thing is very seasonal, it's construction. You don't start building in December, right? Or in the heart of winter. Let's see. I don't want month over month, but remained 17.7% higher than 1 year prior. That's a good thing. And that's single family starts. And that's what we need more of, right? Multifamily starts climbed 31.4% month over month and were 32.9% lower year over year. Now, depending on where you are, I don't think that's a bad number either, because remember, this was completely flipped a couple of years ago, where multifamily was almost exclusively what was being built. I know over the years I've complained a lot about those gigantic compounds, I guess you could call them, that sort of straddle the 85 freeway on both sides, where there's like multiple buildings, 10 stories. I don't know how people live in a crush like that, but there you go. Let's see. And then here's sort of the single family versus multifamily starts. And you can see, look, here's multifamily. Look at that. Look at how it's outstretched. Single family starts. I mean, this even still shows, I guess when they're comparing it to last year, it's becomes different, right? Where's April of last year? There it is. So yeah, definitely down from the same time last year and up a little compared to the same time last year for single family starts. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But again, remember, this is a national trend. In order for us to get any feeling for what's up with us, we'd need not only the Western numbers, which are here somewhere, Midwest, South, West down 2.5%. We'd need to know what's happening right here, right? What's happening in Santa Clara County. And we tend to be not so great about making it easy for folks to build single-family residential homes in our county, unfortunately. Mortgage rates continue to decline to 7.02 this week, which is good news. I mean, that's down 0.4, I think, from its peak when we were looking at it last time. Hopefully we can get that below. I think there's a psychological thing. I think remember, for those of you who've been podcast listeners, you know that we've sort of hung out and discussed what is that magical number, right? And back when things were super low, it was like, do buyers back away once it's over 5%? Once it hits 5% or more, is that it? And then when that didn't happen, we didn't see a slowdown. Well, what about 6%? Maybe 6% is the magic number. Because over the course of my career, I've always come across a weird little number that for some reason had a bigger psychological effect, right? For me, early in my career, it was 10%. When interest rates were at like 10.5, 11, 12, 13%, and people were buying, once they went to 9.9 something, suddenly everything sold. We had inventory that had been on the market for months and months and months. I had several properties I was looking at investing in at that time that had been dropping their list price by $10,000 a month. And I'm like, man, I'm ready to pull the trigger on this one and make an offer on that one. And then in a weekend, on a Thursday or a Friday, interest rates dropped to 9.9 and everything sold. Offers on everything over the next 2 or 3 days. What's the modern equivalent of that? Is it 7%? It very well may be, because I know when we were at 6%, we weren't seeing so much of the hesitation. When I was doing open houses, when it was at 6 point something percent, I wasn't hearing buyers specifically saying, I love the house, but I'm not willing to make an offer with cash costing me as much as it will if I borrow it for this. So it's an interesting one to think about. Next, number of homes for sale is increasing. Now, this is Bay Area modern, so it's interesting to take a look at. Let's see. Inventory compared to the same time in 2023, 2019 as of May 10th, same week, down 36. So kind of interesting. And this is April of each year going back, and you can see historically we're super low anyway. Let's see here. Next, we can talk about interest rates. I pulled this one up this morning. I took $1.5 million, which is about average sales price in Morgan Hill. Interesting change from last time. If you guys will remember, in order to get under 7%, we were paying in fees. Wasn't it like $10,000? Wasn't it $9,900 something dollars in fees to get under 7%? And this month you're getting a credit of $2,256, right? Because look at that, we got the parentheses around there. So, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So that's interesting, right? And for 7.013, it's only $1,600 in fees, which is still crazy, but no points, negative points. That's why you're seeing a negative number on fees, negative points for 6.875. So we'll see how that pans out. Timing is so important on so many of these things. And I think that if you were to list your home now, because my feeling is that interest rates are going to go down a little bit more. It wouldn't surprise me if before the end of May, we see interest rates kind of hovering just below 7%. I think that could be the sweet spot, right? Where folks are willing to jump in. Now, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. I last time I talked about the National Association of Realtors settlement. This is sort of the PDF they put out. It's the most recent one. Really, the only thing that's changed since we talked about it last time, or since I talked about it in the podcast, is the date. It's been pushed, I think August 17th is when they're going to roll this stuff out. All the same concerns exist. So I don't really feel like we need to jump back in. I highlighted a couple of things just because I thought you guys might want to hear about it. Let's see. Are they still here? Oh, there we go. Okay. Does this mean buyer brokers may have to work for free? And it sort of rounded out the types of compensation, because for those of you who are buyers out there, you're going to have to start thinking more about how you're paying your buyer's agent, your representation. One way is a fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers. In other words, you sign an agreement that says, I will pay you this amount of money or this percentage of the purchase price when escrow closes. Next is a concession from the seller. which you can't talk about in the MLS. And whenever they prohibit you from saying a thing that is factual, I'm always bothered by that. That's the kind of legal shenanigans it's the kind of stuff that makes me think there will be another court case in a year or 2 years or 5 years, specifically about the fact we're having to create code words for the transfer of money. Or a portion of the listing broker's compensation. Or finally, compensation will continue to be negotiable and should always be negotiated between agents and the consumers they represent. So I think this second to last point here, portion of the listing broker's compensation, which is basically an emulation of the way it has always been, is a big part of how this is going to play out. We'll have to see how this goes, because in order for a buyer's agent to find out what the compensation to them would be, they need to reach out. But also keep in mind that before you even know which of these is true, you already have a signed agreement as a buyer with your agent on how they get compensated. So let's say there is no concession from seller offered. There is no portion of the listing broker's compensation offered. That means ultimately you as the buyer are on the hook for that amount. Well, what does your lender say about that? If it's a VA loan, ain't going to happen. Right? Because the VA won't pay agents. So what happens then? The bottom line is the system overall is not ready for this one widget that is part of the system to be changed. Nothing else has anything in place to adapt to this new reality. And as a result, a previously unexisting burden is going to be on the shoulders of buyers. And while we can have great conversations about how well represented buyers have been historically, and which is just a general discussion, I think, of the competency of agents, it really is a situation where buyers need to have a very firm grasp on the value that their buyer's agent is bringing. It's a tough one. Before, it was sort of a built-in, you're going to get representation from somebody that you pick. But as we all know, buyer's agents tend to get picked by the phone call, right? If you are a buyer and you are making calls about properties, statistically, you tend to go with the first agent you talk to on the phone, or that you text, the first agent you communicate with, which is really a bad way to pick your agent, by the way. But there you go. Now, this is the other thing that I thought was interesting. Does this mean buyers won't have to use a buyer broker to purchase a property? That is a yes or no question. I realize I'm phrasing this exactly the same way I did last time, but I think it's the way to phrase it. This is a yes or no question. The response does not start with a yes or a no. It starts with the kind of equivocating crap that we've come to expect from large organizations. As always, the consumer chooses whether to use a real estate professional. Research has confirmed that consumers find great value in the services provided by a buyer broker, and we continue to believe it is imperative for buyer brokers to clearly articulate what services and value they are providing to consumers. This was the response from the get-go, and it is completely unchanged. Not a word of this has been changed. But remember the world we are in. We are in a world where people are talking about buyers who can't come up with 1% or 2% or 3% to put down on the house. So how are they then going to pay 1%, 2%, 3% to a buyer's agent? Now, the best buyer's agent are going to want to be compensated for what they bring to the table, and I don't see a problem with that. But that means that you are suddenly going to find yourself in a scenario where buyers in their minds are thinking, okay, I simply don't know enough about this process to not have representation at all. Of course, you'll get those one-off guys who want to represent themselves, which will introduce a whole new level of scary stuff that agents and everybody will have to navigate and open huge doors to potential lawsuits down the road. But what I think buyers are likely going to get drawn to are going to be services that are going to be offered by these all-in-one online guys that'll say, hey, we'll only charge you $1,000. But we won't go there physically. You have to figure out a way to how to get in the house, etc. And which means now sellers agents are going to get pressured to show homes to buyers that are not their clients, which is a level of contact that I totally avoid with buyers that I don't represent, because if they become, there can be no, what do they used to call it back when I was an EMT? Authority of color, right? So, and this is a weird one, right? Because I was in a uniform as an EMT, I was told, never tell people to do stuff. If you're outside of a normal like emergency medical situation and you're administering to somebody, like, because the case that they gave us in our whole here's your EMT training day, one of the cases they gave us was, all right, you're stopped at a stoplight and or you're stopped at a stop sign and there's someone waiting to cross and you wave them to cross the street. They cross the street and then the person on your left runs the stop sign and hits them. And someone apparently had like sued an EMT or a firefighter or a police or somebody because they had waved them on with their color of authority because they were in a vehicle that had lights and sirens and all this stuff on it, right? So the reason why I go on that, the reason why I went towards the shiny thing on that story is because it's the same kind of thing. If I do things that indicate I am asserting my authority as your representative, down the road, I can get hit with a legal thing because maybe you now assumed I was representing you in some way. So one thing that's absolutely going to happen is listing agents are going to be getting lots and lots of a document that's a document that's always existed, but it's a I don't represent you document, right? So I have rarely had to use it. I typically have only used it in very weird scenarios, but it's one of these things where I get a document that's signed by the other party so that they know I'm not your agent, and it just spells it out. I'm not your agent. You're on your own. But that's going to be a complication. But I think, and then there's going to be those greedy agents that aren't going to want to offer anything. They're going to want to negotiate. And here's the other thing that's going to happen. Boy, I tell you, this is the depressing part. Here's what's going to happen. So agents are going to start thinking they'll be able to go into a thing and negotiate a 3% commission with the intent of them keeping the whole 3% or go for 4%, right? Sellers agents giving themselves a raise and pocketing all of that money with no intent of sharing any of that with a buyer's agent. And then when it all comes down to it, they're going to see offers that come in from buyers that say seller to credit 2% to cover buyer's non-recurring closing costs. Translation, pay their agent. That's what that means. That's the code word, right? That's the code word that the National Association of Realtors wants us to use when we're compensating buyer's agents. And then the seller's going to turn it down. So I'm not kicking in an extra 2% for you, because what happens at that point? Well, let's say that scenario happens, and it's gonna happen. Suddenly, that seller is now paying 6%, not 5% or 4% or 4.5% or 5.5% or whatever. They're paying a full 6% total in compensation to agents. And now it is more mysterious than it was before, because all they know is that a buyer or all these buyers that are making offers are asking for these compensations for non-recurring closing costs, and they don't know what that is. They're not going to know. They're not going to look at a non-recurring closing cost and think, well, that's to pay their agent, unless their agent tells them. So this thing that theoretically leans into more transparency and things being more clear to to people involved is going to lead to less of that. It's absolutely stupid. Oh God, I wish I was, whatever room this took place in, it's almost like none of these people have actually ever really done real estate. It's like it was just a room full of lawyers who know exactly jack about how any of this stuff actually works. But there's going to be take my word, there's going to be a extended period of time where this kind of shenanigans are going on, and people are going to get hosed left and right. And at some point, there's going to be law. There's going to be a showdown in the courtroom. What was this one? MLS eliminate and prohibit MLS participants, subscribers, and sellers from making any offers of compensation on the MLS to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. So this is the part that says you cannot talk about compensation. But later they say you could talk about non-recurring. Back when we were talking about how you pay it. You talk about non-recurring closing costs, right? So you create a code word for it. It's just so annoying. Require compensation disclosures to sellers and prospective sellers and buyers. Require MLS participants working with a buyer to enter into a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring a home. So what does that equal? Excuse me. So you as a buyer, you call up an agent and you say, I want you to show me this house. And they say, okay, I'm going to send you give me your email address. I'm going to send you a document you have to sign before we can go. All right, so now you need a class, which I'm going to provide, I think, in a podcast. Now you need a class on what is this form and how should you write it, right? Because you don't want to pick a guy, because despite the fact statistically most of you buyers will do it, will pick the first agent you pick. If you sign that thing, you're going to be committed to that person for some period of time as your agent. Meaning you can't change your agent. The way they're going to write it, it's likely going to make you it's going to make them your agent for 3 to 6 months. But what you need to do is make sure that it's a super limited agreement. In fact, and this is even bad. Even this is bad. Let's give you a scenario. Let's say you're super savvy and you're a buyer and you call and say, I want to view the home on 123 Easy Street that you have a listing on. Great. Here's a form that you need to sign. And you say, you need to put on there that it is only related to that house. In other words, you are only my agent for the purposes of this home, this viewing of this home. Okay, so you do that, and now you decide to buy it. But you don't like the agent. You go in, you now toured the home. They spent the entire 30 minutes ignoring you on their phone, picking their nose, doing nothing, not answering any questions. They brought no additional data about the property. They can't answer any questions. They seem annoyed at your presence. You are contractually obligated to work with that agent for this house. Congratulations. The system, it worked for you. So anyway, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be so bad. All right, folks, it's 3 minutes after 11. I have some houses to look at that I'm very excited about. In fact, I'm going to be taking I'm going back to Salinas. So yesterday, Salinas for my kid's graduation, that's where it happened. I'm an idiot because usually whenever I go anywhere, if I go any place longer than a couple of hours away from my house, I love to sort of just drive neighborhoods and see stuff. I saw a listing. I wasn't able to go view it because we did some immediately after graduation fun stuff for the kiddo, right? He wanted some sushi, which meant Gilroy, not Salinas. But I have a soft spot for Spanish Revival, and there's some great architecture in Salinas, man. I tell you, there's some areas that are horrible in Salinas that looks like boxes got pooped out of the sky and turned into houses, but there are some beautiful homes. Great examples. There's similar homes in South San Jose, right? There was this period of time in the 30s and 40s where just this Spanish Revival thing was super strong. And these houses are freaking amazing. I hate the showers in them. The showers in them are like coffins, but once you get past that, or once you fix that, they're just beautiful homes. I love it. I love the stucco. I love the arch doorways. There's just all sorts of cool stuff. Exposed, rough-hewn beams. Just very cool stuff. So I'm going to go check some of that stuff out. Anyway, sorry. I geek out about that kind of stuff. All right. So if you got any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, you can find me at soldbyrobert.com. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend and enjoy the rest of your coffee, because I plan to. That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I will